If you have not watched Sex, Love, and Goop, you need to go do that now. Seriously, it's absolutely incredible. I've watched it twice. I feel like I learned so much. And today, I have one of the experts from that show on the podcast, Darshana Avila. You guys, she is absolutely incredible, fascinating, just like a wealth of excitement about sex and information. And I actually thought I'm going to intro this a little bit differently this time because I have had quite the journey on this topic myself. I think it's been one of the greatest transformations in my life. The first time I went to couples therapy with my ex-husband, I literally sat there and was like, I'm here because he wants to have sex and I'm not interested. That's literally what I said. So many years in my life, I was not interested in sex at all. Like, I would literally say, like, I'm just not interested. I'm just not an erotic person, which is so far from the truth. Oh my goodness. I understand that now. And I knew that a big part of it was all the trauma that I've had on this. You know, my first relationship as a teenager was abusive. I was raped in that relationship. And I've done so much somatic healing that wasn't really about sex specifically, but affected my level of presence in intimate situations. And we have such terrible, defective messaging on this topic, as you probably have experienced yourself, especially if you are a woman. I remember when I was on a bus in Jerusalem. And this was during the time when I was waiting to have a face-off. I was in my late 20s. I went to the police to report the rape 10 years later. And I was waiting to get a call from the police to have a face-off with that man. So can you imagine, like, they would call me any day, the day before, and say, you have to come in tomorrow. So I was in such a stress mode. And my father called me and I was like, oh, he's going to be, he's going to support me. Like I was like looking forward to what he was going to say. And what he said was, I heard you're not having sex with your husband. What are you thinking? He's going to leave you. So that story just felt like it needed to be shared because this is the messaging, even if it's not as explicit as in my case. This is the messaging that we all grew up with. You need to have sex. It's a chore. It's a homework, right? Like, oh, my desire is so great now that I'm going to be doing my homework, I'm going to be a good little girl and I'm going to do my homework. Oh, my God. And so I found this conversation to be very healing. And maybe I'll record a whole separate episode on my own journey, which, continues. And I have so much more to learn and experience. But yeah, I think you're going to really get so much out of this. Even if you're not going to learn something, just being in Darshana's energy around intimacy and sexuality is very healing. So I am so excited for you to listen to this episode, to hear your thoughts, to hear your takeaways, and please go check out Darshana's work. I know I'm going to. It is very, very profound. And go watch the docuseries because it is damn good. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, Darshana. So I guess my first question that I'm so curious about is like, how the heck did you get into this field?
It's a really fair question.
Yes. And how did you develop your body of work?
Thank you. Yeah. So I got into this field, we could say by accident, but I don't believe in accidents and coincidences of this sort. I had a corporate career that I was chugging along with because that was what, society had told me should be my measure of success. I got married very young, which I did not expect, but I fell in love with somebody who happened to be from a different country. And we decided like, hey, let's get married so that we can be together. And that was in our early 20s. And when we realized that our relationship was not meant for a lifetime, it came undone. I started dating, and it's like the perfect embodiment of the term fuck around and find out, which is that I started having sex with other people. I started having different connections, and I realized how much I didn't know about my sexuality, how much I didn't know about myself. And that was happening concurrent to a really big chapter of my spiritual journey, which in those days was shaped largely through classical yoga lineages. And so spirit was really on fire for me. Sex was really on fire for me. But those two things felt very separate from each other. And particularly in the yogic lineages that I was connected to, that was like emphatic. It was a monastic order where we don't really go into the body all that much. We do these asana practices, but heaven forbid we talk about our erotic energy. And something in me knew that was not the end of the story, and that sexuality and spirituality actually are made to weave together and integrate and coexist in beautiful ways. And it was my hunger for that that ultimately got me to the point where it's like I went from being a hobbyist, you could say, like this was going on the side and in my personal life, to looking around at my career and all the main structures of the life that I was living and recognizing like there's a different path. So I quit the rather lucrative corporate job. I got rid of most of my personal belongings. I ended up moving from the East Coast to the West Coast and then spending a lot of time in India and Bali and Thailand for a chapter where I thought I would coach other corporate types on how to have a more fulfilling spiritual life. And what life wanted from me, back to there is no such thing as an accident or coincidence, was to help people with their sex lives. And the body of work evolved from a more sex-centric focus and offering to what I now call erotic wholeness. That is my methodology and what I love getting to transmit and teach and share. Which I'll just like pause for a moment because I can go launch into the whole explanation of that. But did I answer your question?
Totally, but I'm just curious if like, okay, so there you are coaching corporate types. Was it like,
Pause.
okay, oh, so you didn't, so it wasn't like they were like, can you teach me about sex? Like, okay.
No, what ended up happening in the beautiful gift of my naivety and my ignorance was like I did like a very generic coaching certification, and then I had an extended trip to India booked. And on the heels of the India trip, a Bali trip. And those two journeys were very, very focused more on Tantra, which is a word that I take a lot of issue with most Western people's understanding of it because we've done what we like to do in this culture, and that's take something really vast and nuanced and make it about this one tiny thing. So, like yoga, for instance, in the West, I say yoga, you think Lululemon and somebody twisted up like a pretzel. And in the West, I say Tantra, and a lot of us think of like Sting and Trudy Styler like having extended massive orgasms. That is not what Tantra is about. Sexuality is actually a very small piece of it. But it was explorations of both classical Tantra, which is the piece that has very, very little to do with sex, and Neo Tantra, the newer, more westernized version, that really was the glue for me between that conundrum of sex and spirit. And so I was exploring, I was connecting to communities where this was the focus. I met a bunch of women who, it turned out, unbeknownst to me at the time, were all sex workers. And what I mean when I say that, because that term, add it to the list of things that are misunderstood. Many of us hear sex worker, we think prostitute, we think someone who is having intercourse for money. And we often also think of like people who are of marginalized identities or in desperate circumstances. And the women that I was around were none of those things. They were educated, empowered, really doing beautiful healing work through tantric rituals and tantric body work and creating these beautiful sacred healing spaces for their clients and making really good money. And so I stepped into this by pure quote unquote coincidence, and all of a sudden I had a whole new career path shown to me. And that is what set me on my path. The distinction being that I pretty swiftly moved into a more secular presentation because trauma. because social justice issues, because issues of consent and questionable power dynamics that can go on in sex work of all sorts, and certainly can go on in the name of Tantra in a lot of the communities that have gotten popular, and also some of them fallen from grace in recent years. Um, I wanted my work to really be its own safe haven and safe harbor, particularly because I now primarily work with women and female-bodied folks, where we could explore ourselves in these ways, kind of free from the trappings of all that patriarchal ick. And that's how I got here.
Wow. So what we watched you do on Sex, Love, and Goop, is
Yes.
that like a good representation? And maybe you can share a bit for people who haven't watched it. And I really recommend watching it because
Yes.
such a fascinating documentary.
Yeah.
Would you call it a documentary? Yeah.
I think they call it like a docu-series.
Yeah.
It's the show, for those who may not know, it's a Netflix series, Sex, Love, and Goop, that Gwyneth Paltrow produced. And there are 5 experts, I am one of the 5, and 5 couples. And these couples come with whatever their particular intimacy and sexuality struggles are, and they were paired with one of us to do some really deep diving work. And so, yes, what you see me doing on the show is very much representative of how I work with clients in my private practice. It's also a sliver of it, because you're seeing, albeit beautifully edited, you're seeing an edited version of days and days of deep work that is beautifully, spliced together in, I think, about 30, 45 minutes of total screen time. So it's a 6-episode series, and I appear in 3 of the 6 episodes with the couple that I work with. And their names are Camille and Chandra, a young lesbian couple. And Chandra had a lot of religious trauma that was really blocking her sex. And Camille's trauma was more, I would say, of our dominant culture's conditioning that many of us are struggling with, which is sex as a performance for another person, sex as something that's supposed to look and sound and go a certain way if we're quote unquote doing it right. Who cares how it feels? And so she did a lot of people pleasing, and she did a lot of performing, and really had not felt confident to honor what she needed, even with this beautiful, loving partner. They were engaged at the time. They went on to get married, like darling, darling women. And so, yeah, you got to see me work with them in parts individually and in part as a couple, so that each of them had a space to unwind the trauma imprints in their bodies and open up to new ways of relating with one another and really with themselves. And that is very much what I do with my clients still. So yes, it's accurate.
Beautiful. So let's start kind of like at the basics. I totally relate to this. I have a lot of sexual trauma. My first experiences were very traumatic. And even connecting to desire, like even knowing, I mean, when I work with clients, that they don't know their desires in life. I mean, in the bedroom, it's like next level, right? How can people that are like, I don't know what I desire, I have no idea, how do they explore that?
Yeah, and that's probably the most common reason why people seek me out, or certainly one of the most common, like when we're doing intake and it's like, okay, so what are we here to work with? It's like, I don't even know what I want. I don't even know what I like. And again, it's because if you were born into a female body and you grew up as a girl and are acculturated as a woman in our Western, very misogynistic, patriarchal culture, you're not given express instruction to go out and explore that. What you are given express instruction to do is be polite, be nice, but
And good.
good. And there's the phrase "go along to get along," right? So you go along with whoever is wielding more power over you, your parents, your teachers, your partner. And especially if we're talking about a heterosexual situation, which whatever your sexuality, dear listener, all of us are conditioned to heterosexual norms, right? So we believe ourselves then to be the object of our partner's pleasure and also responsible for it. And where in that equation is us actually learning what we want and like and need, our boundaries, preferences, desires, all that good stuff. So, to your question, how do we get started on that? The first thing we need to do is create the conditions in our own body, mind, and spirit to feel present and at home within ourselves. Our bodies are never so broken that they are not communicating to us. The kink in the chain, so to speak, is that we're not listening. We don't know how to actually be receptive to those messages because we've been so freaking fantastic at ignoring and avoiding them for most of our lives. That's what people pleasing is. That's what perfectionism is. All the striving and the performing. So the first thing we do is really learn how to slow down, create more resilience and capacity in your nervous system, which means that, sure, we want you to be able to activate and be assertive and meet the dynamic circumstances of life when that's what's called for. But we also want you to have access to that state where you can really feel relaxed, grounded, receptive. Receptivity is, it's a few, we can take that word and that concept in a couple different ways here. It's being receptive to what's coming from the outside to you and through you, but it's also being receptive to what's emerging from within you. That guidance, that clear knowing, this is my yes, this is my no. So when I begin working with a client, that's where we begin. It's phase one of the journey, which has to do with rest and regulation, relaxation. I love alliteration here, so you're noticing that one. And it's also relationship building. And that relationship, again, is between me and my client, but it's also them with themselves, them with their body, them with the voices in their heads. We do a lot of parts work. We do a lot of somatic work to really create the circumstances that instead of feeling like you have an adversarial relationship with your own self going on, and look, I'm waving my hands here. Like this has been my journey. This is most of us. So we can take the shame out of it. We can take any of the, like a notion that it's like a personal failing out of the equation. Like this is how most of us are moving through our lives. And this is a way to challenge that and change that for yourself. Once we've spent whatever amount of time there is needed, and that will differ depending upon how deep and complex someone's trauma history is. So if someone's really, really majorly dysregulated or their protective strategies are so firmly entrenched that it's really going to go slow, so be it. It takes the time that it takes. For other people, it might move a bit quicker, whether because their trauma is not as egregious or complex. Not that this is like the trauma Olympics, we're not competing with each other, but different people have different circumstances. Once we have that in line, what I then teach people about is I give options. I give you a menu of ways to be touched, and we explore them. We do practices that have to do with boundary in a very physical sense, with distance and proximity, and how does it feel to move into connection with another person. We do practices that are around expanding your spoken vocabulary about the kind of touch that you want and your confidence in using your voice. So all of these are building blocks that begin to really lay a foundation such that we can then, when the timing is right, progress to explorations that are more overtly sexual in nature. So when I say sexual, what I mean then is genital focus and arousal focus. That is not where we begin. That's deep end of the pool, not shallow end. So we've done all this nervous system tending. We've done all this foundation building. We've explored consent. You've got a lot more clarity around not just like who does it and who is the one being done to. I put that in quotes because I know it's not like actually grammatically correct. But like we talk often about like a giver and a receiver of touch. So Marina, if it's you and I'm touching you, I'm the doer, the giver, right? And you're the receiver or the one being done to. But there's another question that's often missing, and that's, who is the action for? Like, whose desire is motivating what's going on? And
Is that Betty Martin?
it is. This is Betty Martin, The Wheel of Consent, that I'm speaking about. And it's amazing. And I hope you'll put it in the show notes. I hope people go out and explore. Betty's a gem. She's got a lot of free resources out there. So learning about The Wheel of Consent is an important part, because a lot of us actually believe like, oh, well, the only way for me to access my pleasure is to be good at doing what my partner likes. And so we might think like, yeah, this is for me because I feel good. Like, and I'm going to use the total stereotype here of a heterosexual norm. Like, I love giving my partner head. But now here's the reality. I do. Like, when I'm with a lover who has a penis, like, I love it. Like, that does give me a lot of pleasure. But a lot of us will say, oh, well, he likes it, so I'm going to go ahead and do this to make him happy. Or even the reverse. I have worked with clients who it's like, yeah, my partner really likes to go down on me. I just don't feel anything. Or I get bored, or it's kind of like, so it's like, well, why the hell are we doing this then, honey? And we get to unpack that and explore that and replace that, again, that performative experience with one that's born of an authentic and clear sense of, this is what feels good to my body. Here is how I want to move my erotic energy, touch, be touched, play, rest, communicate, share emotions, all of these things. And it's a deeply empowering journey, because even if the focus here is on what might be going on in the bedroom and in your intimate life, the skills and capacities that are being built, they don't have a boundary around them that they only exist in the bedroom. What happens is that you start showing up and moving through every aspect of your life with more of that clarity and that sense of agency. You know what you need, what you want, what you can, and I hate using the word tolerate, because that's often, if we're really being like in the nitty gritty, that's not a healthy consensual dynamic. But let's say abide, because sometimes we make a choice to go along with a certain set of circumstances or an experience, and our choice is, yeah, you know what, this isn't a hard no. I don't feel like I'm truly overextending myself. I can cede this to the other person right now and not feel compromised in myself. That's a valid experience. But a lot of times we are completely overextending ourselves, and we're really out of integrity with us. We are tolerating, we are enduring, we are martyring ourselves, we are suffering in silence or
constricting our bodies, right?
Yes, and then it shapes us.
And I just was going to ask you this question, and you're talking about it now. Like, what happens when somebody does not like giving head, but they're like, I know my partner loves this? Where is the kind of distinction, or the discernment between like, I'm enjoying doing this for my partner, it's not my favorite thing,
Yeah.
versus people pleasing, where you're like really like kind of martyring yourself in a way?
I love that question. I want to start answering it by saying that this is going to be different for different people, right? So I'm going to offer my best response, and no one knows you as well as you do, even if you're not actually paying attention to yourself. Again, that information is there. So it's like, if the scenario, if the energy, if the vibe is like, all right, babe, yeah, I'll go down on you for a few minutes. I know you love it. And then I'm gonna get mine. And it's like, it's held with a certain levity, and you guys are still feeling a lot of ease and warmth in your connection. You are connected to your own body, your own being. You're good. Now, if you are having to, and I've worked with clients, many of them, who it's like, I'm getting high, I'm having a drink, I'm popping a pill before I have sex with my partner. If you're in that type of behavior, if you are dissociating from your body, if you are having to process a lot of challenging emotion, we are not in a good zone. And there's something to examine there about how you can feel more confident in expressing boundaries And I was just about to say negotiating and navigating as one word. Negotiating.
I like it. It's a new word.
A little bit of a mouthful there. But when we are talking about a partnered connection, I mean, the reality is we're pretty much always negotiating and navigating what are some degree of difference in desire and boundaries. It might be a very significant, pronounced amount of different, or it might be minor. It is a rare experience that you put two or more humans together and it's a perfect match all the time, right? So there's a lot to be gained from reframing what a boundary is. Back to the people pleasing, many of us fear giving a boundary because what we fear is disappointing the other person and or losing favor. I'll use favor as like the umbrella term for losing connection, affection, love. In many instances, like let's call a spade, you might be dependent upon your partner in very basic material ways. And this is the long-standing exchange of a misogynistic patriarchal culture, is women trading their emotional and domestic labor and their bodies and sexual energy to get their needs met, because it wasn't until a few generations back that we really had a lot of choices in the matter. So that doesn't go away overnight. And bless you, feminism, and the many waves of feminism that have moved through us. And we know, like, we're having this conversation in a moment where, for all the incredible and remarkable gains that women and other people of marginalized identities have had, we're living in a moment politically and culturally where there are still people fighting tooth and nail to strip those from us, who really believe women to be subservient and second-class citizens. And so look, even if you are, like myself, extremely progressive and ensconced in a very similarly progressive bubble, and your relationships have a lot more equity in them, we can't just negate that wider soup that we're cooked in. And that is culture. That is our dominant culture that has taught us a lot of really horrific things about ourselves, about our bodies, about our sexuality, about how relationship goes. So before I get too far on a tangent with that, it's like many of us are more comfortable with the idea of like, okay, whatever, I'll just do this. Like, I'll have my maintenance sex date, once a week, once a month. And then what ends up happening, and I work with a lot of women who this is the experience. Resentment, but also the gift of what happens in the perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause portal, which, for all the negative hype, it is a time where we just stop tolerating. So many of us are like, I'm done. I'm done tolerating. I'm done settling. I'm done going along to get along. Like,
Totally.
this.
I have so many friends of those ages that are like getting divorced. I mean, I'm literally watching them like, nope, not going to tolerate that.
Yeah. And a lot of them, there are a lot of us who have come to believe a story about ourselves that perhaps we don't like sex, or our libido's totally gone. What I know through ample experience is that I would say 9.5 times out of 10. So I'm going to leave the tiniest bit of space there, but 0.5 times out of 10, it's that you haven't been having sex you want to have, sex worth having, intimacy that really feels like an invitation and a celebration as opposed to an obligation. Right. And so if you've never had that, it makes a lot of sense. Or if it's been ages since you've had it, like, it makes a lot of sense then that your story would be like, oh, I am not into this at all. But then what happens when you start having the sex you want to be having? And this is what goes on in my studio day in and day out, because I'm a professional pussy stroker. And, I'm thinking about even just like I'm thinking about the clients I've seen this week, which as like a little like slice. And so two of the clients that I've seen this week have been working with me for several years and have done their work in chapters, which is to say we had an intensive period, we had a break, and like now they're back again. One of whom went through a pretty like gnarly breakup and was just feeling super shut down around her sexuality. And when she reached back out to me, I was like, you do know that like you can come and use these sessions purely for your pleasure. We don't actually have to work on your trauma and dig into the deep psyche of it all. Like, you can just come and feel good and feel connected into your body. And she was like, are you kidding me? And we have been having these like transformative, delicious sessions because she doesn't want to jump into another relationship right now, but she wants to feel connected to her pleasure. And she knows that I can help facilitate that. And so that is what we do. Another client, deep trauma history, and has been on a major journey of reclaiming a connection to her body and feeling safe enough to, I mean, as a point of reference, when we first started working together, her startle response was so intense that if her husband came up behind her and like put a hand on her shoulder, she'd jump. It would get triggered in our early sessions. And we did very slow but deep work to the point where now her last couple of sessions, it's been like, I gush over this. She's like, oh my God, this is what it can be like. Like, I actually feel pleasure. She had no idea how to track arousal in her body up until a few weeks ago because she was so disconnected and so distrusting. And now she's like, wait a minute. She said this yesterday. She's like, I now want this. Like, it was the most powerful statement that has come out of her mouth. I want this. I want this for me. So all along, it was, how can I show up better in my marriage? You know, how can we have a thriving, intimate life together? And this has been that pivotal moment where for the first time, she's like, oh, I want this for me. Another client I'm working with is on the other side of a radical hysterectomy and a medical menopause, even though she would have been roughly around menopause age soon, but got a cancer diagnosis, had a radical hysterectomy. Her entire sexual response has changed. And she went from feeling a lot of access to her turn on and libido to very little. She went from being, and this is a lesbian woman who way more identified as the giver, as the top, as the I'm going to do the things to my partner, and had a harder time with receiving. And so a lot of what we're working on now is helping her grow her comfort and capacity to be more of a receiver, because that's actually what she's finding that she wants. And it's really unfamiliar to her. So there's just like a little slice. And that's what goes on. And there's such incredible empowerment in each of those journeys.
I love that. What are some of the biggest myths that women have about our bodies?
Okay.
And our pleasure too.
Yeah. So the big one that I'll relate to the whole middle-aged perimenopause to postmenopause is that like you shrivel up, and then it's like there goes your desire and there goes your libido. Like, nope, not true. Not true. What is true is that most of us will experience some degree of physical, emotional, energetic shifts as our hormones are shifting. So there might be periods where things feel drier or tighter or itchier, or it's not as comfortable. And the beauty of the time we live in now is we have access to more support for that than ever. And everybody gets to choose their own adventure, but you've got hormone replacement therapy, you've got topical options, you've got an array of lubes, you've got different toys. So a lot of us are in the inquiry of like, okay, maybe things are changing, but it doesn't mean they're dead. It doesn't mean they're done. There's not a shelf life that our libido comes with, and we cross a certain chronological age and then it's gone. And I attest to this also having worked with a lot of women in their 60s and even into their 70s who were having some of the best sex of their life, because talking about not giving fucks, like they are so done with that. and it's like, yes, it's my time. And I love these women. Another myth, and I'm going to stay with this, like the dryness thing, there's a myth that a wet pussy equals a turned on pussy and a dry pussy does not. So that is just factually inaccurate.
Oh,
Some
yes.
some bodies lubricate more. Some bodies don't. Your lubrication may or may not be tied to your arousal, and your arousal may or may not show itself through lubrication. So if you have felt a certain way about your body, maybe you're like super wet and you feel self-conscious about it, or other end of the spectrum, like you don't get wet, you need lube and you feel self-conscious about that. What I really want to normalize is that for as many of us as there are walking this planet, our bodies simply are do different things. And you can help yourself in whatever direction you need help with. Like, and just like a fundamental foundation there of like, you get to embrace yourself free of shame, like as you are. That's a big one. Let's see, what's another myth I want to dispel here? Oh, well, I think one that is more an implicit thing for a lot of us than explicit, because we are cooked in a soup. Back to that like metaphor, we're cooked in a soup that is obsessed with youth and youngness and what is attractive and what sex gets to be like. A lot of our notions about that are actually very adolescent. Like our ideas about sex don't necessarily have much nuance or maturity or refinement to them. And who you are sexually, how you are sexually, your wider erotic expression, it's going to change over time. So you are not supposed to forever and always have sex the way you did when you were 17 or 27. And it also
Thank God.
thank God. Like that's what I say too, because so many people are basically just overgrown teenagers for all the skillfulness and savvy they're bringing to their sexuality. It's like, hey, like there's a lot more available here, and that ties into the myth that, again, this is very much attributed to our dominant culture being rooted in misogyny, which is to say that men's everything, penis is everything, it supersedes women, supersedes what the vulva and the vagina needs or wants, because it's also penis centric. We have, like I say the word sex, and I guarantee what you are thinking somewhere in your mind is a penis and a vagina. And sex can be defined far more creatively, far more robustly on your own terms. There is actually, there's a series of studies that have come out saying that for most people, sexual satisfaction actually is not even measured by their orgasm. It's measured by intimacy. It's measured by having a wider array of physical options of how you be together, how you are stimulated, that it's not just about penis and vagina, which, in case this myth has not already been dispelled for you, for most females, penis and vagina intercourse ain't it, y'all. In order for us to reach a climax, in order for us to feel pleasure, it has far more to do with external clitoral stimulation that could be on its own or in combination with penetration. And that penetration could be penis and vagina intercourse, but it could be fingers, it could be a toy, right? So it's the external stimulation that's really doing it for most of us. The idea that penis and vagina is like up on the highest shelf of the highest echelon, that's just a cultural trope. It's not the truth of how most of us are enjoying our sex. And so what I want to invite you to do, dispel the myth that that's the right way or the best way to be sexual, and define sex for you on your own terms. Get creative, get curious. There is so much to explore.
What are the tools and resources that you like? Can people only work with you if they come to your office, or are there resources that you recommend, yours and other people's, of like exploring our bodies for women?
Yeah, it's a both and. So yes, a lot of people love to come and get to be in my office with me and work with me. And the cool thing there is I have folks travel from all over the world, different parts of
Wow.
the country. I do work in immersion formats where we'll spend several days together. So it is possible to work with me even if you don't live locally to where I am, which is Oakland, California, San Francisco Bay Area. If you're local to me, you have the option of, instead of that immersion, we could do a series of sessions over a larger arc of time. I do have online resources. I have a couple of self-paced journeys that you can go at your own pace into these explorations. And then again, talking about like living in a time where we've just got more resources than ever, anything that you are curious about in the realm of sex and intimacy, and probably 7 million things that you don't even know to be curious about yet. There's a coach. There's a coach for that. There's a book for that. There's a video for that. And so the number one thing I want to invite people to do here is take the shame out of the I don't know what I don't know, and the fear, which it's easy for me to say. It's a different thing for us to do. But let's just normalize that most of us have had a piss poor education around our sexuality. We have had a lot of really negative and harmful conditioning about what it is to have a body, to be in a body, to be erotic by nature, which one of my Darshana isms is that we are erotic by nature. And what I mean when I say that is it's not a mistake, it's not a flaw, it's not an accident that we are born into bodies that are imbued with so much sensitivity, that we have these senses that perceive and delight, that we are wired for pleasure. We are deeply, deeply social beings, and our need for relationship with others is hardwired. It is encoded into our DNA. None of this is an accident. None of this is shameful. So as long as whatever is going on is happening between consenting adults, you're good. And if you're interested in something, even if it's really taboo and far out there, I guarantee you there are ways to learn. So I know you asked for specific resources, and I, like I said, I have some, and I'm also genuinely like delighted when people reach out and it's like, I'm interested in this thing. Like, who do you know? Like, who can I follow, or who can I learn from?
Who are some of like your favorite educators and teachers on this topic, and like books that you love?
Okay. So I feel put on the spot with that one because there's so many good ones. Who's coming to mind? My friend Midori, Midori. Midori is a very well-known and respected kink educator, and she does this through a very like feminine empowerment lens. And so Midori is a wonderful person to learn from. There is a great, and kink is what's coming up to mind because that's where a lot of this ends up going for a lot of people. It's not the only thing. And kink is a big term that encompasses a lot. So if that word is scary for you, totally cool. Also, it's probably not what you think and everything that you think.
I think the show actually broke it down really well. And for me, it broke a lot of myths that I had around.
Yeah. Well, right. Because on the show, kink is presented as one of the 5 erotic blueprints. And that body of work, the erotic blueprints, belongs to Jaya, Miss Jaya. And so that's a great way to explore. And she has, whereas like me, erotic wholeness is me, that like, and Jaya has trained a lot of other coaches and practitioners in her method, the erotic blueprints. That's a great way to learn. And that includes sensuality and sexuality and kink and the energetics. If you're interested, and then it's like, that's actually a really good jumping off point for a lot of people because she offers an assessment. And then it's like you get to see like, oh, what am I gravitating toward? And then you can learn more about those specific things. Gosh, I can totally follow up with you and give you some more as they go.
I'm asking for my education too, and for everybody listening.
Yeah.
I love how passionate you are about it. I think that it's very healing to be with someone who's like so passionate about a topic that is still so taboo in our culture, right? And I'm wondering if there's anything I haven't asked that you feel like needs to be said.
Gosh, thank you for that question too. The thing that I really, really want everyone to hear and like replay what I'm about to say 7 million times if need be, like, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. Any of the things that you were hung up on, I promise you, they are not personal failings. So much like, Marina, you just reflected my passion about this back to me as something that is kind of rare. Yeah, and also it's because I get to spend my days watching what happens as people come out from beneath the weight of those stories, of their own brokenness, of their not enoughness, of their this is my fault, I'm something's defective in me. None of that is true. And when we get out from those stories and we claim our erotic wholeness, when we liberate that power, oh my gosh, it's just such an unstoppable force. It's such a beautiful healing. And I'm passionate because I want everybody to know it and have access to it. So whoever is listening, like that, you're good. Nothing's wrong with you. And there's a whole lot of opportunity here. All you got to do is take one step toward it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think this is really gonna be so supportive for so many people. So thank you so much for coming on here.
It's my pleasure. And thanks for all the wonderful questions.